Hey guys, welcome to another episode of ElHeffe Chopshop. This week we're working on the CRV Cabriolet, and Maxpeedingrods sent me a massive turbo. And if you haven't already, check out the website for t-shirts, stickers, lanyards, and air fresheners all coming soon. There's 2 t-shirts available. There is the original, and then there's one with the Corolla on the back. Let's get into this silly episode. It's finally time to do something with this. Now, if you don't know what this is the CRV Cabriolet. K24, all-wheel drive, weight reduction package. Can't show you what's there because that is a future project. But if this goes well, then I may show you what's under my hand a little sooner than expected. So here it is. If you're new to the channel, this is the CRV Cabriolet. So I bought a CRV for spare parts for my partner's car and decided that I'd keep the running gear and the engine and everything in a shape that was usable. So this thing still runs and drives. Other than airbags, there's no error codes, which is ridiculous. And the CRV itself was crashed before I got it, so there's no cooling system, and I cut a bunch of the front end out. Now the plan with this has always been to reuse the running gear in something. Originally I was going to use the rear end and the all-wheel drive gearbox in the Camry, but because of the steering rack placement I couldn't do that. So I've ended up with a CRV driveline that I couldn't use. Well, that's where Maxpeedingrods comes in, the sponsor of today's episode. So they hit me up and asked if I'd like a turbo. Of course I'd like a turbo, but I didn't know what I was going to put it on. So originally I was going to put it on Jackson's Mark 1 Golf, but we couldn't get that thing to run after trying many times. So the only thing I have running that I can play around with, and if it blows up it doesn't really matter, is the CRV Cabriolet. But that's as far as I've thought, to be honest. I've gotten a whole lot of fittings and pipes and joiners from Garage 7, and I should be able to make this work. But I'm not going to touch the ECU, we're just going to put extra fuel in it where we can, and plumb it all up, and just send it. And I think if this thing works reasonably well, we take it to a 4-wheel drive park with a roll cage and stuff. What do you guys reckon? What should I do with this thing if it is turbo and successful? So onto the plan anyway. Now we've got this pretty much open floor plan at the front here. We can do whatever we want. Now I'm thinking we try and put the turbo right up front. The only piece I haven't gotten yet from Garage 7 is the drain for the actual turbo, and that's going to be our restricting factor because it is a fixed length thing. So I'm thinking if the turbo is up the front here, somewhere, we'll be able to reach the sump, and then the rest of it is all like way oversized, so we should be perfectly fine there. The exhaust can go underneath the gearbox and underneath the sump, and coming out the front here, we'll just do a U-turn back there and come under. It's going to be pretty quick and dirty. So turbo placement is our main issue here. So the other thing is I don't plan on running an intercooler, I just plan on running the turbo straight into the intake. We've got a few sensors we need to pick up on, and other than that, we just need a piece of pipe between the two. So should be really quite easy, as long as the turbo is basically here somewhere. We can just go straight in there. Now it is quite a big turbo, but it can be clocked wherever because there is no internal wastegate, it's only external wastegate. So we can mock this in any orientation we want. So the rear housing is going to have to be something like that, and the front housing could be something similar. So right about here would be quite funny. Very large and in charge, and up front. So I think that's what we go for. We can get an exhaust pipe through here pretty easily, and we can probably make some brackets and stuff off of there or off of the gearbox. But we are going to have to clock this turbo, so I'll do that as well. But I also need to take this pipe off, so I'll start there. So there's 6 bolts around the compressor housing. If you crack all of those off, you'll be able to spin that to whatever orientation you desire. Just in case you're wondering, that's what the billet compressor wheel looks like. and the inside of the housing. And there's the anti-surge technology that they have put into this turbo. The little veins in this gap here. Pretty good. So this is where it starts to get a bit tricky. I have just clocked the turbo to the orientation I wanted and clocked the center section so that it will drain correctly. However, when I put that drain on, that drain may interfere with the exhaust housing, so I may have to clock it slightly back one way or the other to get clearance there, but I won't know until I get that drain, which is what I'm waiting on. But the idea is this will sit somewhere like that, and it should all be pretty happy with the flow and should all fit together. I've got everything apart finally. So what I did is took off this guy here, and there's 3 bolts there and a heat shield over the top of it. So I've taken that off so it's out of the way. Then you can get to the oil pressure sensor. So this is BSP fitting, and what we needed to do is create a BSP to BSB with a NPT off the side, because most of the Speedflow stuff is NPT sizing. So what I've done is got this guy from Raceworks. This is the only thing that I could find that was compatible. So then we have this fitting here, which is 1/8 NPT male to -3 hose end. So we want to thread in the adapter, then we've got the sensor on the end, and then you can thread in the hose end to the side, and you can have your oil pressure feed to the turbo coming from the top here. So I will leave this bit off for now. I'll reinstall this, and I'll reinstall this guy, and then we have a nice spot to tee into for oil pressure. So I decided whilst I was in there I may as well put this fitting on. So I'm not going to show you guys how to do this, I don't want to open myself to that liability, but I have 2 meters of hose here fitting on, so I'll screw that into the long adapter that we just had, and then we should be able to put everything back together and test for oil pressure. Okay, so I've got all that back together. We've got a nice long feed line here. Obviously this is way too long. I'm going to leave it at full length because I would like to reuse this if this project does not work, but we can get to the turbo wherever I put it, probably even on the back seat. So the next thing to do is to test if this actually has oil pressure. I don't want to do that right now because I'll let all that sealant go off first, and then we'll do it probably tomorrow. Test that, and we should be good. So what I'm going to need to do now is work out what pipes I need to make this thing all plumb up. So I'm going to need to do some kind of U-turn at the exhaust and then get it up here, up the front, and also go from the compressor side to the throttle body. So I'll work all that out. We'll come back tomorrow with a bit of a plan. So as I said previously, these are the fittings that you need to plumb up. So on the top we've got a oil feed, on the bottom we've got an oil drain, and then on the sides we have coolant or water in and out, and I have all the corresponding fittings. So these are an M14 by 1.5, which is the water feed. So I've gone to a 1/2 inch hose tail. So all that is this fitting here. That's the part number there. So you're going to need 2 of those, and they will thread into the sides like that, and then you run your hose to your cooling system. Then I have to run a 716-24 male for the oil feed. That's what the Maxpeedingrods site said. So I haven't actually tested this one. That's the part number. So that should go into this up here, this feed line up here, and it adapts us to a -3. So then to go off of that, what I've got is a 90-degree -3 to hose tail. There's your part number there. That's just a 90-degree, which will screw straight onto that feed there. Once I have put this on the other end of that oil feed line. Then we've got another M14 by 1.5 water fitting. So that goes on this side here, like that. And then the only thing left to plumb on this would be the drain, which I'm still waiting on a PRP, quite a long john, that bolts straight to that and should go to us up. So they are the fittings you'd need if you bought a Maxpeedingrods turbo. New day, Harley's hanging out. So I've started off, I've just put the second fitting on this big old long line. So I know the turbo's going to be about here somewhere. So this line is way too long, obviously. So I've turned the fittings to the right orientation. So it'll be about there somewhere. And now what I want to do today is try and work out how to get the actual exhaust from where it is up front here for the turbo. So I need to pull the exhaust off and then measure all the sizes. Then go get some bends in mild steel and we'll bring it up front here and get that turbo placed. And then by the end of today, I'd like to have the engine running, turbo spinning, oil feeding. I still don't have the drain. I won't have the water hooked up and I probably won't have an exhaust. But if I can get that far, then that'll be really good. Maybe the end of this episode, because I really need that drain before I can go any further. But I think that's a good target to try and get to today. Then this thing can run, turbo does spin, good start. So I'll rip everything out, go measure some stuff, and we'll be back in a minute. Alright, so we've got the exhaust off, and now I know what I can cut and what I can't cut. So I want this bit to attach to the manifold, and then the cat can go away. But I did just notice great. Alright, I'm back from the shop. Got some straight, and there's two bends over there. So what I need to do to start with is I've got this flange here. I think it's a T3 or T4 flange. I need to make that fit in there. So this is 2.5. I don't know if that's the right size, but we'll make it work. And the shed is a massive mess at the moment, which is why I'm not doing this in here. So a quick squash, and that actually fits reasonably well. It's not good, but it's good enough. So I'll be able to weld that on there and then cut this thing to length once I get to that stage. So with that turbo end started and sorted out, I'll move on to this end. So I'm going to reuse the factory flange, cut off the cat, and then probably cut off the bend and add my own. But I'll cut it off here to start with, see if I can put this on backwards and see if it points in the right direction. If it doesn't, I'll just cut it off and weld on another bend. So I've got the cat cut off and I have the heat shield cut off. Now I'll try and jam this under the car and hopefully it bolts back on. If not, I'll cut it off. I can either rotate that guy or I can use this piece off of a Mercedes that I used to have. Let's chuck it under the car and hope for the best. Well, that didn't fit at all, unsurprisingly. So I'll cut this off about here and then I can put this on and rotate it wherever it needs to be. It happened. I got stung twice, possibly 3 times. I'm not sure. It really hurts though. Anyway, that bit's cut off. Chuck that bit back on, and then I'll get the bend, which I've put somewhere, and a texter, and mark that guy, and hopefully get an exhaust coming out the back, sort of towards the front. So I decided to trim this down a little bit more, and then this guy I've trimmed as well. So now it should be nice and tight. Should fit definitely. I bet it won't, but it should fit definitely. Got a texter, climb back underneath, mark this thing up. I told you it wouldn't fit, so I need to take that flat part off up there, so that that pipe can fit inside this thing, and then I should be able to get it all in the right spot. So that's trimmed down. Now the pipe fits inside the flange. So now I should be able to put it on the car and mark it, take it in the shed, tack it, weld it, and then start on the next piece to bring this thing to the front. There we have the original flange bolted back on, and the little 45 or whatever you want to call it. So it would have been better if it was a 90 and a really sharp 90, because it could come through here, but I don't have that. So I'll work with this for now. If I hate it and can't get it to work, I'll put a 90 here and try and get it to come through here, but that's a really tight 90. So here we go. So funnily enough, the piece I cut off is exactly the right bend that I need, but it is 2 pipes in one. So I need to try and get that center pipe out because it will restrict flow very slightly, and this is a high-end build and I don't want that. So I'm going to cut this up and try and get that thing out the middle. And if I am successful with that, I'll use this guy. If not, I'll have to cut a 45 out of a 90. So I just cut that piece off, and these 2 pieces fell apart. So now I have a 2-inch bend and a 2.5-inch bend. Let's go put this on the car. Bit of zappy zap. Let's get this back on there. See what the next piece is going to look like. Well, it fits so far. Now I need to get from there out the front somewhere. Okay, got the first 3 pieces welded together, so now we just need the 90 on the end. These are absolutely booger welded. They're not good at all, but they should be good enough. So they're quite hot. I'll leave them alone. It's nearly 2 o'clock. It is prime hot part of the day. So I'm going to go inside for a bit, because even when I'm over here, the sun is straight up and It's super hot just there, so I'll wait a couple of hours, wait for the sun to get over there, get me some shade again, and I'll crack on. Alright, it's been about an hour and a half. That's definitely cool now. The shade has moved slightly, so I'm going to have another crack at this, try and get this last bend welded on, and then get this turbo mounted up. I'll let another hour or so pass, and now the sun is just about to go behind that tree, another half hour or so. So it's time to try and fit this thing. Hopefully we can get this turbo mounted in the next hour or so before it gets dark. Finally, we've got the exhaust to the front of the car. Now we should be able to sneak an exhaust pipe past this counterweight, and that is in the worst position it can be. So we should be able to sneak one through here. Need to run a mounting tab to the gearbox somewhere, probably here. There's 2 bolts just there, so I'll run something off of there to the exhaust, and then the turbo is going to sit right up here somewhere. And then the drain that I haven't got yet is going to be too short. So I think with the right angle of the dangle, we'll be able to get the new Maxpeedingrods turbo sitting up here and pointing straight into there. And we'll have probably like 6 inches or so to join. And then this will be pretty long and it'll sit pretty high and look really aggressive. Alright, that's pretty cool. So it's a lot further over than I expected me to end up, but I've kind of just been going with the flow. I was actually hoping to bring it over a fair bit and actually have that pipe pretty small, but it'll work. I reckon the drain's going to be too short though, so that'll be fun. If you look over the top here, this is in a reasonably straight line to the throttle body, and if you look at it on that angle, they're roughly on the same angle, so we're pretty close. And then I'm going to have to do something about these fuse boxes and an exhaust, because that's going to get real hot and melty. And then I'm going to have to make a bracket off the gearbox to support all the weight, because that thing weighs like 9 kilos or something. So, super cool. It's really silly. And then when I get to fueling, I can put more injectors and stuff in the top of here. I'm not sure that's how I'm going to do it just yet, but there's options. There's always options. So if I can get this finished off with the bracket and the turbo hanging there bolted on, and get some kind of exhaust happening, I think that'll probably do for this episode. I need to plumb up this super long oil feed, which is, oh, you know, just perfect length. Perfect length. So I'll plumb that up, I'll get the dump on there, get that bracket on the gearbox, spin this thing over, start the car, hopefully, spin the turbo up for the first time, and then the next episode on this thing, I'll build some kind of pipe here, add some fuel or something, make this thing work. I'm not going to be able to drive it for a while because there's a lot of stuff in the way. So the second episode may be a while away, but this one, gone pretty well, really. I also need to build a cooling system, which I forgot about until just now. Great. We also have this tile external gate to fit at some point. It's apparently a copy. My mate gave it to me, or lent it to me, I'm not really sure. But that's going to have to go on there somewhere. Good thing there's plenty of room. So it's a new morning. I've bolted the turbo on. I've reinforced that with some dodginess because I can't get the welder around here. So I'd like to do some gearbox to exhaust, dump, brackets, but I can't do that without the welder, and I can't do that off of the car. So that'll have to do for now. So we've got the gasket in here, got some bolts in, clocked this in the correct orientation. So we've got the center section upright. Everything's bolted down nicely, so I need to try and do some kind of exhaust, which is the last part I can do today, and try and move this stuff. And then the oil feed is ready to go on, but I'd like to crank the car over first and clear the line out, and then pump up the turbo, and then we need a drain. But for now I'm just going to have to use a small container or something and catch the oil, and we should be able to start this thing and let it spin. So first up, I'm just going to move all of this stuff away from the exhaust. Moving on to the exhaust, so I've got this flange here, which is bolted to the back of the turbo, just a bit loosely. The gasket's just here. Then I've got a 90, which I'm going to cut down a little bit, and I'm going to make it weld on roughly at that angle. Should be nice and ridiculous, and also point the gas slightly away from whoever's driving this. So I'll take that into the shed, weld her up, cut it down, and then bring it back, bolt it all on properly, and then we should be pretty close to trying to get this thing to run again and seeing if that spins. Only a few small steps to go. I finished up the dump. I grabbed a piece of pipe that had 2 pipes in it by accident, but it looks kind of cool, so I just left it and welded it on the inside of this so there's no exposed weld, which is good because they look like poo. So I just need to test this oil feed, or grab a battery, test the oil feed, hook up the turbo oil feed, and then get a pan to catch it, and then I will plug the sensor back in, and then it should start, and we can spin this thing up. So I'm just going to test the oil feed into the oil cap here. Hopefully this will pump out any of the contaminants in the line. I should be doing this into a bucket, but I don't really care that much. I just don't want it to go through the turbo. So I'm going to crank the engine over, so you guys watch right there and tell me if oil's coming out. So I'm really not sure why that started without the sensor. The Accord would not, so it's weird that this one will. So I've got a drain pan, which is the bottom of a bottle, and I'm going to try and fire this thing up. We should be able to feed some oil through the turbo. See this thing spin properly. Maybe make some whooshy noises? I hope so. And then next episode I will bank a battery tray, put a radiator on it, and actually make all of it be able to run for longer than 5 seconds. So let's see what we can do. The oil is draining kind of slowly, so we can run it for a little while. That's about it. My oil drain is full. Well, that's pretty cool. Okay, so it's not first thing in the morning anymore, so I can fire this up and give it a proper rev. I've emptied the oil drain, so we got a minute or so. Fire this up and give it a little limmy on 3.5 grand, because when these things aren't moving, they have a lower limiter than when they are moving. That's enough of that. So that'll probably do for this week's episode. If I run this thing any longer, I think my neighbour's going to get upset. So thank you very much to Maxpeedingrods. This is quite a big turbo. It seems pretty good, and this was a pretty fun little project. So I'll be back for more later, and I will get this thing actually running and driving properly, and we'll do some silly stuff with this Maxpeedingrods turbo. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.